vocabulary, the increase in engaged time in algebra and other math sections at the middle school and elementary school. I would be very interested in seeing what the result of that is. And if it's not increasing in trends, then I'd be shocked.
Well, I mean, as it is, you can see we have a positive trend line with what you've got on the slide right there. I mean, at the high school level, we've increased almost twofold. And we are significantly above the other state averages. So I think, to me, that's a very positive result.
I think they are attributable to the accommodations we did. As we looked at the data, we saw, okay, we think this is what we need to do. We've done it, it's worked, but not to the satisfaction that we need. Then we start looking, well, what's the next thing we need to do? And Dr. Sharma gave us some really good stuff this spring that we can implement.
And the other thing that is striking here is that the difference between the elementary and middle schools, where you've got 70% plus proficient, and then suddenly a couple years later in high school they're down to less than 50%.
I think that's because at the through the 8th grade, it's a grade level equivalent.
Right.
This is what's expected at your grade level.
Right.
But when you get to the high school, it's okay. While you're at high school, you have to learn all of this. And by the way, we're going to test you 2 years before you graduate. So I think there's a huge difference between grade span expectations and grade level equivalent.
The same with the reading and the writing is much more rigorous because it involves much more abstract and higher order thinking. The textbooks that the high school kids are trying to read are, especially the nonfiction, are difficult for them to get their heads around because it's new. So I think while the early grades is those successes are great, they're not necessarily predictive for when we step up to the next level in higher order thinking and abstract reasoning. That you're going to continue that. If you're a concrete reasoner, you're starting to have difficulty.
And if we just move on, because the next is the writing, and one of my questions is 2005. Except for at the high school level, the scores at the elementary and the middle school were pretty high 2005, and then they plummet, and then start kind of working their way back up. Well, not really even at the elementary school, they haven't really worked their way back up yet. So I'm kind of curious as to what's happening with writing. And both have...
We anticipate that one.
Your goals have that one, isn't it?
Yeah, we goals have that one. I actually have a handout that I pass out to the school board about some of the things that we do in elementary school. But when we look at the elementary test scores and we analyze them, where we lose our largest percentage of points on a regular basis is students' open responses. And up to this point, we have not had necessarily a study of the way that we teach writing in the elementary school and how writing is scored on this test. These rubrics for scoring are published, they're well known, and you can actually look at what is the incremental difference, what's the subtle nuance between a level 2 and a level 3. For example, how many adjectives do they use? What percentage is spelling errors in comparison to length of sentence? The rubric is very, very specific. And while we have what I believe is a relatively good reading program at the elementary school, we've never undertaken the study to see its correlation to the scores. And I think looking at these scores, it's time that we do that, and we've actually stated it. I've stated it, although my staff is sitting here tonight hearing it for the first time. I was going to state this as a goal next Tuesday at the staff meeting, as that we wanted to take a look at the writing, because we're satisfied that our students are good writers. I've actually sampled, looked at samples of student writing. I've actually observed my intermediate teachers teaching writing. They're doing an astounding job. Now it is that method of instruction matching to how a third party out there is scoring how we're looking at writing. So I can tell you that by this time next year, we will actually have a pretty specific report about where we've gone and what we've learned, so that we can see those scores step to rise.
I mean, the good news as I look at these results here, because in the final analysis, we're concerned about the final product, which are the graduates of high school. I mean, it's the whole progression from, and so as I see what's happening with the high school, but those are very positive.
And that's, again, because of the data we got from the early tests. One of the things we did is early on, we required that all classes have at least one writing assignment. Not just write a paragraph, but do the one rated piece of writing. English classes obviously do more. And then social studies voluntarily took it upon themselves to become writing teachers, so they do a lot of writing in the freshman year, especially with their students. And those opportunities have helped kids get better. One of the conflicts or disconnects for us is we're a writing process school. So we teach kids to write in several steps over time. Then you give them a test, you say, write this from start to finish today. While you're sitting there without your usual tools, you know, so they have the opportunity when they're writing for academic work to write, brainstorm, revise, edit, spell check, have a peer reader. All those are good things, you know, that we do in our everyday work when we're writing something for publication or for the public. But we don't do enough of, okay, you have a half an hour, write an essay on this topic without your usual chance to revise and edit. So, you know, that's going to be a little bit disconnect, because we do regard ourselves as a strong writing school. And this is one of the things that's perplexing our English department, because, you know, they see these kids write and they say, gee, they write well. And then we look at their writing sample, because we do get the writing samples back from the test, and they're not up to the par that they normally give us. And that, simply because they've had time to review and revise and edit.
So you give more essay type tests?
Yeah.
The other thing to remember is that the writing test is only given in the 5th, 8th, and 11th grade. So it's a span of learning that they're being assessed on. I just wanted to remind you.
I feel like I'm going to monopolize on exactly like that. Well, I know. I did my homework.
The advantage of sitting in
Keep them in line.
Well, but also, like I said, I'm an engineer, so I like looking at numbers, analyzing things and stuff like that.
I had a one-on-one with him, so I got right.
Oh, okay, so you've already asked all your questions. Okay. Well, then just a couple other questions, you know, before everybody gets completely bored to tears. But again, I found it interesting. I particularly liked the following the student growth and watching, you know, and so looking at the, and particularly when, with the spreadsheet part where you could actually look at like the current 8th graders and see how they've done since 2005 and look at those scores. And like I look at the current 8th graders, I go, well, that's great. There's a steady progression of you know, percent proficient or above from year to year. And so you look at that, you go, that's good news. And you flip back a page, and no, it wasn't the 7th graders, maybe it was the current 6th graders. You look at again, the current 6th graders, and they're all over the place. You know, they're good one year, not so good the next year, and they go from 75 to 93, great, down to 82, down to 79. So I'm wondering
Reading or math, or reading or math are you looking at?
That's
Sorry.
the math.
Okay.
That's the math, and so I'm curious, because this is basically essentially the same group of kids, even though I understand they go from year to year, different kids come in and out, and so there's...
Remember the 93 is the 2008 year.
That's right, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So there was a slight fluctuation
Yeah.
between 5th and 6th grade.
But when you look at when you're analyzing this,
Mm-hmm.
how much is that just, maybe the kids, is that where you identify these are shortcomings in how we are teaching stuff? That they're not coming into,
Both.
you know, 5th grade prepared to take the test as they should be, or?
We look at both aspects. this particular report gives us an opportunity to look at, you know, which, you know, are we having students that are dropping from level 4 down to level 3 at this grade level? Are we having students that are dropping from level 3 down to level 2? Are we having students moving up? So if we see a trend where students are slowly dropping levels, even though they might still be proficient, they've still dropped down a level, then we're gonna look at the student, and we're also gonna look at our programming to see, you know, is there a particular strand that's starting to give us more trouble? I mean, is this where their inability to do fractions is really starting to hit them? Is this where the numeracy skills are really starting to come into play? Are we starting to apply some knowledge? And we adjust down from there. So these are informational reports where we look at subgroups, particular students, and we look at program samples. Are we looking at a group of 7th grade boys that are, you know, we see a whole group that they're not doing well in reading? You know, what can we do to grab that group of boys that are suddenly not interested in reading anymore and get them back where they need to be? So the subgroup information here is important. Do we see double the number of SES kids? Is that why that number, or is it the same number of SES kids, but you know they're dropping here? What is it that we can do to grab that group? So that's why it's important to look at the subgroups so we can find out where they are, why they are where they are, and then get them back where they need to be. So, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes on after the initial reports are generated. Lori and I worked today for many hours on the strands for the numeracy and literacy strands, and you know what strands are we declining in, you know where are we showing improvement, and doing a lot of analysis on that.
One great thing for us at the middle school is that Lori has an office there, and it's not too far down the hall. It's not real great for Lori, but it's great for me because I can say, hey, let's talk about this student, let's talk about this item, let's talk about this data, so that just as part of our regular everyday process, we can be looking at that data, and I can be thinking about how I can support and help people, or actually even doing a lot of work with parents, talking to parents about specific skills that students are missing. So that's a real serious advantage to be able to walk down that hallway and say, Lori, come show me this, and let's see what we can do for this kiddo, for the teacher, for the parents, whatever. It's really been a great asset.
Okay, keep
One
going.
more question.
Is
One
it
of the
the
other
same
things
report or different report?
No, actually, now I'm looking at the grade level both, and just because of the way the numbers were presented, were presented a little bit different. Let's say, for example, the grade 2 teaching year for math, I think. Yeah, it's math.
Is it this one?
Yeah, it's math. Yeah. Well, no, actually, I'm actually looking at the spreadsheet view.
Okay. I got you. Right here.
And again, my question here is as I'm looking at this, and here you have it broken down by the percentage of L1, L2, L3, and L4, and how that compares with the state percentages of L1, L2, L3, L4. So, I just noticed that whereas overall we're pretty good at L3 and L4 compared to the state average, we're considerably below the number of L4s. And is
I'm sorry. Math, grade 2?
math grade 2, yeah, right there, and right there. So our percentage of L4s in 2010 was 15, and the state was 28.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that something that you also look at as to why, we don't have as many folks excelling as the state average? We're overall L3, L4, we're at the state, yeah, we're kind of, we're about at the state average, I guess. Let's see.
Right, because we're a little higher in L3.
Well, yeah, we're higher in
lower
L3, we're lower in L4, so but do you look at what do we need to do to get more kids
Right, we look at, like, one of the things that Ken was talking about earlier, and Dick, is that we had students that were 1 point off of getting to that next level. So we look at that with all, you know, how many kids were right there on the cusp of moving up to the next level? And what do we, you know, is there something that we can do to help advance them forward?
And so you're looking at that
We
both
look at each category.
from a curriculum basis for the group and on an individual basis.
Instruction and curriculum, and then,
Right.
and of course, the big thing that we like, which wouldn't really come into play with grade 2 because there is no, or grade 3 actually, there is no growth data, but that growth report is just so important, and we pull that and we look at all, you know, whatever student is in that bar chart in the red that didn't make their growth target, we look at all of those kids and see, you know, what do we need to do to help them, and sometimes it is just 1 or 2 points, which is very frustrating.
What I agree, the way that you posed the question, we don't always meet the L4 levels, but when I went back and took a look at that, almost consistently through the whole chart, if you combine L3 and L4 for a total percentage, and you compare the state's L3 and L4 to the total percentage, we actually exceeded on the significantly.
Right, and
So we have a very large cohort up in the L3, L4. Your question specifically, so how do we move more of the L3 to the L4, and that's one of what I'm saying off this reaction. But I think that's worth noting. Our L3 percentages usually are very high.
And we also looked, that number that you were talking about was all students, so those are broken out into subcategories as reported by the state, so we would look at that, what number of those students were special education, where were our SES kids, and where were our regular ed kids.
Well, and that was, I was gonna, you know, bring it up because I had noticed it, but Ken had already brought it up that in recent years, the IEP and SES kids, whereas the regular ed got that nice trend line positive, just in like 09 and 10, we've seen drop there, which clearly is a concern.
it's a concern.
And, I mean, I could go on and on, but I won't, but I find this very interesting. I think it's very useful information, and I appreciate the effort you put into compiling it, and then also hearing on how you all are using it. One last question.
Okay.
I forgot to ask, 2009 you had pilot for writing. You probably, that was probably mentioned.
It was a
and I
pilot
forgot
year
about it.
for 5th and 8th grade writing items. They were new writing items, and the students took the test, but we were not judged on
So
them.
that was for
yeah.
all the kneecap students
All
everywhere.
kneecap students in all the states that take kneecap.
And so does that mean that comparing the scores after that pilot year to scores prior to the pilot year might be iffy?
We just had that conversation today. Yeah.
Except
What would you say? Except the high school,
High
because
school,
they
we
were
did-
not a
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, our scores are the real deal.
Because you're starting now to compare apples and oranges. So we'll look next year for improvement, and it will be a consistent item.
And I'll get with you separately about the one with the actual math questions I thought was interesting. There's at least 2 of the answers are wrong.
There was one, I did put one
Either-
wrong.
either-
I made a
either-
mistake, it was supposed to be B and D, and I
Okay.
had them inverted. Yeah.
Speaking of
Because I went through and I said the whole second.
Yeah, that was, oh my gosh, let's give this to them. So, my brain was working at a different level than my hand was.
Was it a high school question?
It wasn't, it was 4th grade. I think
No,
it was
actually, it's an 8th
was it
grade,
4th grade?
no, there's an 8th grade
Was it an
question.
8th grade, which?
It's the one with the scale and the balls and the cubes.
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
I'll get,
Yeah,
I won't
so-
bore everybody with that, but
Yeah.
that's either,
Are you smarter than 8th grader,
You'd
yeah.
already be scoring proficient on a 4th grade
I
level.
would hope so. Okay, any further questions?
No, it's great information.
Thank
Well, again, I thank you very much for putting the information together, and also thank everybody who showed up. It's, I found it very interesting to find out how you're using, because gathering the data and not using it isn't gonna do us any good. I think, I applaud your efforts to use the data to not only improve our test scores, but you know, improve the education. I mean, that's the whole purpose, that the
Right.
kids get a decent education and they graduate with real skills that they can use. So again, thanks to everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
I a suggestion has been made that we probably ought to take a break since we've been going for a
Describe me
while,
to
so,
I'm
okay.
ready to take it into break.
So why don't we take about take about a 5-minute break, and then when we get back, I guess we'll move on to discussion on class ratios. Okay?
Five.